Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. So it's been a while since I've uploaded, and I want to try something very different. So as you can see, I have the Final Fantasy X Reddit page open, and I posted a question almost a year ago, actually. I've been meaning to make this into a video, but I never quite knew how to, turn a Reddit post into a video. But I did ask a question that, I found it very curious. So I wanted to ask the Reddit community about who is your overall favorite character in the game. Now, obviously, not everyone who plays Final Fantasy goes to the Reddit page. That's why I was wondering, maybe I'll make this into a video, so maybe we can have a conversation about it on the video. So in the comment section below, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. And even though I asked this question almost a year ago, it's pretty much just as relevant today. So before I start with this video, I want to ask you guys this prematurely. I was gonna ask it in the end, but I'm gonna ask it now, and then I'll ask it again probably in the end. Is, do you guys want me to make more Reddit style videos? So this is a video where I make a post on Reddit, or if you guys want to join, like, I don't know, apparently you can make Reddit pages now. I'm a noob when it comes to Reddit, so I actually don't know how it works, but I guess you can make your own community and people can join. So if that's something you guys want, then definitely let me know, and then maybe we can do this like sort of on my own Reddit page. But for now, we'll rock it out with the Final Fantasy X Reddit community, because there is not much, but there are people that are still active there. I get notifications on my phone on sometimes people asking some very interesting questions that make me think, and I'm like, oh, this is a conversation that I probably want to take part of. And chances are most of you guys are probably thinking about the same thing, considering that this is a primary lore-based channel, although I'm making it more personalized in a way. So it's going to be showcasing more me as opposed to just my production. So almost a year ago, I asked, who is your overall favorite character in the game? This seems like a loaded question, but I am curious, who is your favorite character in the game all time? It can be gameplay and or story based, how they perform in battle, character development, if you can feel you can connect with them, etc. And I got a lot of responses actually. Well, to be fair, I responded to just about every single response, but we are actually going to go through some, probably most if not all of them. I've noticed a lot of striking patterns with this, and depending on how a person describes why a certain character is their favorite character, it does speak a little bit about who they are as a person, because obviously you tend to be magnetized towards those that you can relate to the most, or just someone you find very intriguing. As you can see, there are a lot of comments. That's why I wanted to make this into a video. So we're going to go through the comments that I find interesting, and we're going to discuss them, and we'll go from there. So the top comment was the boy that wants to be a blitzball when he grows up. Oh my goodness, that made me laugh so much when he said he wanted to be a blitzball when he grew up. You gotta talk to him. Like, you can tell by him. He's just a really great conversationalist. I can't tell if that was an error on the developer's part. I hope not. I think they just left it on purpose for humor purposes, and that was so funny. I personally enjoyed it. So we have a response here. Waka, he has a lot of growth. He goes from a traditionalist and somewhat racist point of view to a more open-minded one. He's just a normal dude, product of the world he lives in. He's also one of the stronger characters and throws blitzball at giant monsters. Try attacking Evray when he's far away from the airship. It's so silly, I love it. Honestly, I like most of Final Fantasy X's heroes, but dislikes most of the antagonists. This is understandable. I mean, the heroes, they are meant for you to like them, and obviously the antagonists, you are supposed to hate them because you are looking at it from the point of view of the heroes. But in particular, when he pointed out Waka, considering that Waka has gone through some tough times, especially in the world he grew up in. He lost Chapu to Sin, and because of that, his faith in Yevon kind of hardened and solidified even more, to the point where he just fully believes in it, and atoning for the sins of the people, like everyone. If everyone atones for their sins, then Sin will one day disappear. And obviously the fact that Sin took the life of his younger brother and his parents kind of left him to be by himself. He's got Lulu and Yuna, of course. They all grew up together, so they're childhood friends. But still, when you are affected that heavily by the events of the world, you have this religion, supposedly gives you the teachings that will one day ensure that Sin disappears. You kind of start to mold your mind into believing in it. Can't really do much about that. There's really no other alternatives, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Somewhat racist point of view, yes, because that is how the religion, they kind of look down upon like the races like the Guado and the Ronso, at least up until recently. In terms of being the stronger character, of course, that's debatable, but yes, his ability to chuck blitz balls at giant monsters, especially flying ones, is just pretty funny. And I like his attack reels overdrive. His attack reels overdrive, any ability or any attack that lets you deal multiple times in one turn is always pretty good. As you can see, I did respond here. Initially, I didn't like Waka because of how he lived this life based on religion, but as I played more, I understood his character, especially considering he grew up around Yevon. I'm reading this pretty fast because you guys can read it for yourselves. I also did point out for the antagonist, I did like how Seymour was written because similarly to Yuna, he was a half-breed, but one that drew a lot of prejudice towards him as a child, whereas Yuna is more of the opposite. Like, well, if anything, it's more of the opposite, but with still the same effect. There was a lot of pressure on her because her father was the High Summoner before her. So there's a lot of, you know, pressure in her name. So here we have another response. Yuna, she already had such an insane weight on her shoulders after being expected to defeat Sin and bring the calm. Her father was beloved by Spira and was the equivalent of a real-world saint, so when she was confronted with the deeply rooted corruption of Yevon, she chose to face it head-on and continue her duties as a summoner. She could have easily ignored it and helped to continue the cycle of death, but she stood up to an entire religion, continued to help the people of Spira, and helped defeat Sin for good. I've always treated Final Fantasy X as her story, despite what Tidus says so many times throughout the game. Everything seems to revolve around her and her resolve. Yes, so Yuna, again, big strong case, because Yuna, she was just a teenager. I think she was only 16 at the time of Final Fantasy X. That is a lot to put on a 16-year-old, especially with her father and mother being gone, so she was also an orphan. It is also known that she has very striking resemblances to her father, not just in looks but also in her personality. Of course, she will always do what is right for the people of Spira because that's exactly what her father would do when he went on his journey to defeat Sin. And Braska was also hopeful that Sin would never come back, but he never actually went out of his way to find for a different alternative. Yuna, because she had both Tidus and Riku, both who didn't believe in Yevon and who wanted to think outside of the box, and Oren, who also knew that if she had continued the way she had gone, it also wouldn't work. So Yuna did succeed in the end of the story, which was great, and I also love Yuna as a character. And I also added on that I would say Yuna definitely did grow up a lot during her journey, and her determination was so strong even if everything she believed in was questioned. At the end of the day, her main goal was to bring happiness and joy to the people of Spira, no matter how long that lasted and who got in her way. Having people like Tidus, Oren, and Riku along with her definitely helped with her motivation to take on Yevon because they were also non-believers, along with the rest of her guardians, of course. What do I say? Always bet in yourself. Some life advice, not just for the video. We have another response here from Zonikoi. It's a tie between Oron and Seymour. Oron is such a rock for almost all characters as the game progresses, and his own story is so complex by itself that I'm still hoping on a prequel with the Pilgrimage of Braska, even though it will never show up. Seymour is totally for a different reason. Having a being of the complete destruction like Sin is hard to make a story around as the main villain, and Seymour fixes all of the gaps that it brings. He's a true sociopath, where his ambitions and goals will not be stopped by anyone, not even his own family and love interest. Although I'm disappointed in his gameplay a little bit, namely the last fight where he's such a joke if you know how to play, which is so late in the game, his inclusion and impact on the story is so strong. Waka is also great because he's a normal sports player that gets dragged into such a deep storyline. His conviction to the teachings all the way past Yunalesca gave a huge showing of how the typical person on Spira thinks. He's a very good balance for a story with such crazy happenings. Oren, and a lot of you guys know, Oren is my favorite Final Fantasy X character overall. And if you guys, I'll leave a link to the Reddit post here if you guys want to check it out for yourselves, check out all the comments because I'm not going to go through all of them. But yes, I do point out that Oron is my favorite character overall. It might not be said directly, but you guys have heard me through different videos that I love Oron. Oron is very badass, obviously, and you know, he's very quiet, yet he leaves such an impact in the story. And he's just that guy that kind of like, he is Yuna's guardian, but he knows what's happening throughout the way. It's as if he's living this life. Well, he's living this life the second time, exactly the way it is with Braska and Jet. Well, not exactly the same, but you know, it'll have the same journey, same temples, same end result if Yuna does decide to go down that route. Seymour's another character where a lot of you guys, I have disputed in the comments, where a lot of you guys hate Seymour, whereas me, I don't hate Seymour because I completely understand where it comes from. And if you can understand where a person's current qualities come from, then that is an example of a very well-written character. We only get, I think, 1 or 2 instances of Seymour's childhood, and that was enough to tell you what happened as he grew up. And there's also details such as the dialogue with Jiskel and the sphere as well. When you tie that up with meeting Anima, when you obtain Anima and you speak with Seymour's mother, then you really understand how that relates to what Seymour has become. And at the end of the day, you really can't blame him. He was a half-breed. People looked down on him because of it. As a way for him to make up for that, he was encouraged to fight sin, but you know, at the meantime, his mother was dying, so she chose to become his final Aeon, which he never used to defeat sin. And he kind of let that grow, like that prejudice grow inside of him to the point where he became the Seymour that we all know and hate in Final Fantasy X. And Waka we already sort of gone through, so we'll leave it at that, but it is also a good point. You're also gonna see this as well, is there's gonna be like, and I also noticed it in the Final Fantasy X 3 Thoughts video, where people are going to be asking for the Jet, Braska, and Auron storyline. I would love to see it in a story, whether it be a book, an audiobook, a game, whatever. I would love to see it, you know, mapped out, because it would be a lot of fun to read. And here's one. I'm gonna choose this one because they do add in a quote, and it really does showcase Auron's personality as the rebellious type. Although because Jet and Braska were kind of like, they're so hopeful, Auron couldn't really do anything. So that's why I am going to put this one here, but I'm not going to go through too much of it, but there it is. Auron, hands down, he has a tragic backstory, wisdom, stoicism, and incredible drive. It's amazing when you finally get to Yunalesca and come to understand the complexity of his story. He is also the one who goes against tradition and Yevon without any qualms about it. Yeah, that's another really good reason. Again, a whole fight with Yunalesca, Auron's great monologue speech, or his part at least, it really was very inspiring. And honestly, like, if you ever feel down, I would probably listen to this quote to probably bring myself back up. The one that I showed earlier. And it goes well with this one. So here's one for a different reason. We have Riku. I always loved how bubbly she was, even though she knew she would lose her cousin, and how she deals with race issues and her whole home getting destroyed. She is such a strong character, and she's super fun in Final Fantasy X too, and it's great that in the second game she gets a chance to relax and hang out with her cousin and friends hunting spheres. Well, you could also actually say that with Yuna, because, well, Yuna no longer has to do summoning duties, so now she can also hang out with her cousin and her friends hunting spheres. But yes, I totally understand where you're coming from. Riku is someone who was always happy despite things looking down. She was always looking at the positive side of things, except of course the Thunder Plains, because she has a very bad fear of thunder, but you know, that's also understandable considering her childhood when she was struck by lightning as a child. But yes, despite everything that's happening in Spira, it's very rare to see people be cheery and positive, because they always live in fear that sin will come for them and their cities and their families and kill them. And Riku's just kind of like going along all happy and bubbly no matter what, which is a very good outlook of things for sure, and I can definitely see why as well. And there are actually a few comments where it points out that sort of reasoning for Riku. And again, she's also Al-Bhed, so she's not a Yevon believer, so you know, it's hard to live in fear if you don't follow a religion that revolves around the thing that causes destruction throughout all of Spira. So here's another Yuna one. The leading ladies in Final Fantasy tend to have pretty great stories and strong characterization, but Yuna really feels like a co-protagonist. So much so that one of the reasons 10-2 was always a disappointment to me was that it didn't feel like a game worthy of her character. In 10, not only do we see her grow over the course of the story, but her and Tidus grow together as people and a couple. They both start out pretty naive, living under the shadows of their famous fathers and the difficulties it brings. Then over the course of the story, they learn to define themselves in what they want and strengths they never knew they had. Yuna gets one of the big tear-jerker moments for me as well. There's quite a few moments in the game that get me, but when you can listen to the sphere she's recorded saying goodbye to her friends, oof, cue the tears. Yeah, this was big, but there's one thing I want to point out with this one actually, is that while yes, they both have famous fathers, Yuna was more pressured into it than Tidus because more people knew that Yuna was Braska's daughter more than people knew that Tidus was Jet's son. If anything, the only person putting the most pressure on Tidus was Jet himself, pressuring him to become a blitzball player, a better blitzball player, forcing Tidus to defeat Sin, something that he couldn't do, not to mention having that sort of bullying relationship where Jet always picks on Tidus even as a child. So, you know, they had a much more complex relationship, whereas Yuna knew that Braska loved her and that he wants her to grow up no matter what, to be successful, and you know, she chose to follow his path as a summoner, and the rest, as they say, is that. Here's one that's a different character. Lulu doesn't get much love, and I think her story wasn't explored much except until they reach the Yojimbo stage and realize her ex-pilgrimage issue. Other than that, she's always been the reserved big sister, but I love her absolutely for her design as a black mage. She's my bias forever, but I adore Yuna a lot too for the story itself. Seeing how much expectation is put on her, and that's scary to carry out your duty, and people sometimes forget you're just another human too. And not to mention her outfit and the aeons are so pretty. I mean, Lulu's outfit, having the 1,000 belts surrounding her body, that's pretty cool too. I like that outfit. But yes, Lulu is one of those people where she is also quiet, much like Oran and Kimari. Because she is quiet, she's gone through a lot of things on her own as well, which again, you don't see until the Yojimbo stage. Now, before this, you knew that she was engaged to Chapu until Chapu enlisted, or until Chapu got killed by Sin during Operation Mihen, and since then Lulu's been kind of reserved and withdrawn. But yes, her previous pilgrimages also played a part because the summoner, I believe Father Zook, quit, and well, the other summoner, I forgot her name already, I think it was Lady Ginham, she got killed at the cavern of the Stolen Faith. So she led 2 unsuccessful pilgrimages as a guardian. So here's one about Maester Seymour that I am going to point out. Seymour Guado, everything about him speaks to me as the perfect villain and boss. He appears to be normal at the start, but is actually the most twisted and screwed up guy. Love his character design, and he has the best boss music I've ever heard in my life from any game. First of all, I don't agree with you that he has the best boss music I've heard in my life from any game. Especially if you're referring to his Seymour Omnis music from Inside of Sin. Yes, orchestrally, it is well designed. Personally, I am more towards Final Fantasy XII's music. So yes, the political Star Wars, that Final Fantasy XII, not 10-2. My favorite soundtrack from that would probably be, well, I believe it's called Life and Death in the remastered version, but it's the one that plays when you take on no, not Judge Bergen. You take it, I believe you listen to it when you take on Judge Gabranth at the Pharos, at the lighthouse. That is my favorite soundtrack overall. Going back to Seymour Guado, of course, he is someone, again, in the comment section below for many videos that have him in it. I've always sort of tried to see my side of things, or have people see my side of things as to why I don't hate Seymour Guado as much as they do. A lot of them hate Seymour because of how he is in the current state in Final Fantasy X, which I understand. But again, looking at how he grew up and seeing things through his mother when she talks to the party about what happened with Seymour, why he became the way he is, you can't really blame him at the end of the day. His father wasn't all too supportive of him either, obviously, which led to Seymour killing him. Obviously, he didn't have the same kind of remarks towards his mother because Seymour never killed his mother. She offered to sacrifice herself so that Seymour could get the adoration that he so very much yearned for by defeating Sin using Anima as the final Aeon. Now, of course, Seymour chose not to go down this route because obviously he didn't want to lose. He was already devastated at the loss of the only person who he felt ever loved him. That's why I don't personally hate Seymour. But yeah, he is a complete asshole, obviously, and you know, wanting to destroy all of Spira just so the people wouldn't have to live through what he lived through, and doing that by becoming Sin. In his mind, he is doing a noble thing, and that's just based on how he grew up and the circumstances surrounding his childhood. And we're actually going to end it here with this last one. So there's one last comment here that I'm going to point out. This person went from best to worst, and honestly, I love that he did a top 10. So Vulcan Hades, thank you so much, even though it's been almost a year. We're gonna start with number 10, Kimari, the Chewbacca of Final Fantasy X. What a comparison. Number 9, interestingly, went with the Thunder Plains Innkeeper, very polite and warm, and I believe she is also a Blitzball player. Her name is Mifiri, and she is the slowest Blitzball player ever. But yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Number 8 is the generic Albed co-pilot. He's in love with Riku, and that's cute. That's not Buddy. I think Buddy is from 10 too, but still, it's pretty funny. Owaka the 23rd, Merchant Extraordinaire. Enough said. Fair enough. Maester Seymour, noble villain with the purest of intentions. He just wants to end Spira's misery and cruel curse. You can't argue that it's a depressing world. Again, because he grew up like that, he doesn't want people to live like how he lived. So what's the best way to do it? Wipe everything out. Can't really blame him because of how he grew up. How can he find any other solution based on the conditions that he grew up under? Yuna, Leska, and Donna. I assume he's thinking Donna here. They're just so hot, I want to be their guardian. Someone's clearly jealous of Lord Zeon and Barthelo. For number 4, Riku and Waka. They're both comic relief and I like their personalities. Just gonna see Waka's face right in front of the screen. It's really all you need to see and you can understand it. Number 3, Yuna. I mean, this is her story after all. She's the center of it and the strongest mentally. Again, there's a lot to put on a 16-year-old and she went through all of it. Now, obviously, she had help from her guardians emotionally, physically, mentally, etc. But still, as a 16-year-old, you should not have to go through all of this, and she did. So yes, I do agree. She is very strong. Lulu, she is the most mature, intelligent, and down-to-earth, and you can't argue with those magical knockers. All right, fair enough. That's very true. I agree with this one for sure. She's definitely gone through her things, and she knows a lot. In terms of how Spira works, like in terms of like living in the streets, Lulu would know the most, like would be the most intelligent and the most wise when it comes to that. And number 1, Oran. He's just cool, like a little too cool for his own good, deserves his own game. That's like, you can see how many people really like Oran to the point where people think that he should deserve his own game. I would personally love to see it. Maybe his uprising, Maester Kinok will obviously be part of that story. So it'll be even before he finds Braska and becomes his guardian. And that's actually going to do it for this post. As you can see, there were a lot of comments and I didn't get through every single one, just the ones where they had, you know, a pretty good explanation as to why. I will leave a link to this Reddit post in the description below if you guys want to go check it out and read the rest of the comments and the replies and the responses for yourselves. And let me know if you guys want me to do more videos like this. If I go to the Final Fantasy X Reddit community, or maybe even make my own on my own Reddit community. If you guys want to join, let me know about that as well, where I'll ask a question related to Final Fantasy, whether it be 10, 12, 7, between 1 and 15. Definitely let me know, or you guys can even ask it yourselves and I can address it in a video as well. That's also an option, but let me know in the comment section below and let me know what you guys think about this kind of video as well. It's very different from the lore videos that I make. It's not as professional, it's more personal, and I talk more about my opinions more than anything. But let me know what you guys think. And other than that, this is Enzo signing out, and I'll see you guys very soon.